Well, I think I may have misled everyone, and I'm going to pull another slip here. And rather than the budget, I'm going to go to the homeless census.
You approve.
Wait a minute. You can see how much order I've got. Thank you very much. Now, we are going to hear item 18, which is to receive and accept the 2017 Monterey County Homeless Census and the Survey Report, presented by Elliot Robinson and Catherine Turney.
It was sent as a PDF.
In there. Definitely in there.
Okay, and Peter Conley is here. Good. We stalled enough to get our expert in the room. Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm Elliot Robinson, Director of Social Services, and we're here today with Catherine Turney, the Executive Director of the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers, and Peter Connery from Applied Survey Research. Every few years, as you know, we do a point-in-time homeless census that gives an estimate, the best you can get, on the number of homeless in the street or in shelters or transitional housing. And that homeless census is completed within the first 2 weeks of January, last 10 days of January, with a whole crew of volunteers. The homeless census itself is funded, the Monterey County portion, by the Department of Social Services, the Behavioral Health Bureau in the Health Department, the PG Challenge, and the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers. And it's always a document, an assessment of the state of homelessness that we anxiously await, because I think there's so much attention on the issue of homelessness with so much activity, but we see homelessness in the streets and we see it growing. And this year, like so many other communities around the state, we saw a substantial growth in the homeless count yet again. And so here to present, I think I'm going to turn it over to Catherine first, or to Peter first, who will go through the slides. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair Adams, members of the board. We appreciate the opportunity to present the results of the 2017 Monterey County Homeless Census and Survey. The first slide here, I won't read it all, it's a little wordy, but it defines the HUD definition that we have to work under, and those of us who work with continuums throughout the country have to follow. It's a very narrow definition of homelessness, as you may read up. Very important is the last bullet item, which talks about those that are not included, but frequently seen on the streets in our community. Folks that are in a double-up condition are not counted. Non-homeless inventory chart shelters, those are the unofficial shelters that exist in small churches and community centers and private homes all over the country, all over the county. Permanent supportive housing is not included, rapid rehousing, or unsafe areas that our team was unable to go to. So the numbers that are presented today do not necessarily reflect those in those living situations. The point-in-time process in Monterey County is a mature one. Monterey County has been doing this project, and we've been able to help on this effort since 1999. And with continuous improvements since that year, we've generally followed the same methodology. So this is good news because it provides for good comparative data throughout the years and gives us fairly accurate trending data that is able to be looked at in a consistent manner. There's three components of the methodology. There's the census component, which is an observation-only street count. That's coupled with a shelter count, and then that gives us our raw number of actual homeless, both unsheltered and in sheltered situations. And then that's followed up by a survey sample of folks in both unsheltered and sheltered environments, where we ask detailed 2-page survey questions which get into their conditions and experiences, enabling us to do the subpopulation recording as mandated by HUD and requested by the local coalition. Those primary data collection efforts are followed up by analysis and reporting, and then subsequently submitted to HUD as part of the funding application, which is done every year. We'll get into the results of the census right away. You can see on the upper left graph the trend since 2007, every 2 years, as Elliot mentioned. And this year's increase was up to 2,837 homeless, which is an increase of roughly 23%. Of that 2,837, there is a sheltered population represents 26% of that, and 74% of the overall population is unsheltered. When breaking down on the bottom row, it gives a distribution of where folks are living. Of that 2,837, 11% in emergency shelters, 15% in transitional shelters or safe havens, 25% were literally seen on the street, 7% in buildings, 32% in vehicles, and 10% in encampments. I don't have longitudinal trending on this slide, but the number of persons in vehicles is a significant increase over what we've seen in previous years. At a jurisdictional level, you can see there's been some changes from 15 to 17. In general, some peninsula areas like Seaside and Sand City have gone down significantly, while Marina and Delray Oaks on the peninsula have gone up. But there are very significant increases in Salinas, and also significant increases in unincorporated areas. The Pajaro area went down in our 2017 reporting. That's partially a reflection of the weather and the fact that historically we found many folks on the levee, and the levee was flooded during this period, and the number of folks normally seen on the levee were not seen in our 2017 effort.
Can you describe what the other area was where there was such a marked increase? In the
It's just
unincorporated
sort
area?
of, that's all of the unincorporated areas of the county. That's probably less, that's less the North County area. There's some North County, a little bit of South County, and outside city limits in most of the other parts of the county. We have more detail on that. We didn't present that. One of the general phenomena that we've seen in Monterey County, as well as other communities throughout California, is there's been increasing levels of code enforcement and criminalization of homelessness, and that enforcement is more marked in the jurisdictional areas that have the resources to make that happen. And as a consequence, homeless will move out into unincorporated areas where there's less enforcement. That also represents a lot of those vehicles that we saw in the previous slide were probably located in unincorporated or other areas.
If I can just chime in, we can come back to a breakdown of by region with that population, is that correct, Peter?
Yeah.
We can bring that.
Thanks.
As mentioned, the survey gives us some subpopulation detail. And this slide indicates some major reporting areas that we're responsible for to HUD, as well as for our own internal measurement for the continuum. Chronically homeless, which is one of the big target areas nationally, was 605 individuals, or almost 21% of the population, most of whom are unsheltered. Chronic, for those of you who may not follow this, is a condition of a year more continuously homeless, 4 episodes of homeless in the 3 years, plus having a disabling condition that hinders employment or housing. So both those conditions, if those both are met, then you're defined as chronically homeless. Real bright spot in this data is the decline in number of veteran homelessness. There are 110. This is less than 4% of the overall population, which is still a target of 110 folks. But as a percentage of the overall homeless population, it's excellent. Most other communities that we work with are over 10 to between 10 and 15%. Persons, we had a significant outreach and planning effort by community organizations throughout the county, and had great outreach to families, unaccompanied children and youth, and the numbers in those categories went up significantly throughout the county. There were 160 families noted in 2017 compared to 2015, which had 117 families. We found 152 unaccompanied children, that's unaccompanied youth under 18. We found 50 last count, increase of 300%. And then in the transitional aged youth, the number almost doubled. 446 were found this year and 220 in 2015. The unaccompanied youth and unaccompanied children and transition aged youth, those are basically unaccompanied homeless under 25, represent 21% of your population in Monterey County, which is a very high number, though consistent with many other communities now. Other profiles, I'll go a little more quickly here. This is all populations in families and individuals. The breakdowns, 17% under 18, 18 to 24, 16%, 25 and over, 67%. Let's see. Gender, consistent with what we've seen in other places. Sexual orientation, 16% not straight. Race, ethnicity, this is again consistent with what we've seen elsewhere. Additional profile information. A big question is, are we serving, are the homeless that are in Monterey County homegrown? Are they attracted to the county? Consistent with other years, 83% were Monterey County residents. Length of time in Monterey County, you can see the distribution in that. So they've been here a while. Parents with children under the age of 18, again, the high impact on families. 11% have children under 18 that are with them. Length of homelessness is something we're seeing increasing as that chronic number shows. People are entering homelessness at a continuing rate. 36% were experiencing their first episode this time. 59% said that their current episode of homelessness was for a year or more. So that's, once folks are getting into homelessness, it's tough to get out. Age at the first episode, you can see how it affects the community at young ages. And then consistent with other communities and with Monterey County, the homeless in Monterey County have a history of foster experience. 13% had been in the foster system at one point in their life. Employment status, again, this is cost of living, wage differentials. 25% of our homeless are employed full or part-time. Those that are unemployed, 28% said they were unable to work, typically because of a disabling condition. And then 47% were looking, 25% had given up. Self-described top 6 responses for the primary event that led to their homelessness. Financial issues is by far the largest, in alcohol and drug use, fight or conflict with family or otherwise, family issues, legal issues, mental health issues, all are continue to be high. Interest in permanent housing, this is a survey question we posed to the community to try and get to the notion that folks are homeless by choice. And what our research has found is that though that may apply to some, more often than not, it's that folks don't feel there's an appropriate option for them. We asked a question about if appropriate housing were available, would they be interested? 82% said yes. Obstacles to permanent housing, rent affordability, employment, move-in money help, transportation help are some of the top responses that we received. And again, this is not only consistent with previous studies in Monterey, but it's also consistent with other communities in California we work with. Health conditions. This is in disabling conditions. 36% of our respondents said they had a disabling condition. And then of more detail on what those disabling conditions were, you can see ranging from emotional and mental health issues, PTSD, TBI, physical disabilities, chronic health, HIV/AIDS, drug or alcohol use. All remain very high. And again, these numbers are consistent with what we see in previous years in Monterey County as well as other California communities. Access to care, 52% of the respondents get some government benefit. Food stamps are by far the largest, in addition to free meals. And then you can see what the percentages are in these other five areas. Reasons for not receiving assistance, that's in the box to the right. There's a lot of misinformation or eligibility issues. ID, address, disinterest, immigration issues. Those, again, are all consistent with other years and other communities. So that concludes the thumbnail of the findings, both the census and the survey. I'll turn the floor over to Catherine, and she has more that she'd like to share with you about where this fits into the coalition and Human Services plan to address the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. As Peter outlined, Monterey County numbers increased by 23% since 2015. But we are not alone as this trend is sweeping through many communities in our nation. For example, Alameda County up 39%, LA 23%, King County 16%, Butte County 78%, Orange County 7%, Portland 10%, Santa Monica 26%, Pasadena by 8%. And the list of increased percentages continues to grow as more communities release homeless census findings across the country. Analysis of the full census report reveals significant information that can be used to develop and implement strategies to fully address local challenges related to homelessness. Just a few of the report drivers include: we are getting better at implementation of the census process itself, which means we are better able to find and count people. For example, HUD established 2017 as the baseline year for youth, which means future years will be tracked back to 2017. As such, unprecedented efforts were employed to locate and count homeless youth. The success in those efforts led to increased numbers in the subpopulation, which impacts the overall increase. Clearly, the most significant driver is growing rents, pushing people living at the margins into homelessness, coupled with an insufficient inventory of rental housing geared to very low and extremely low income individuals and families. Despite stepped-up activities to engage with landlords, we do not have sufficient number of landlords or property owners willing to participate in rental subsidy programs. A trend that we call geographic redistribution was noticed in 2015 and confirmed in the 2017 numbers. And this is what I mean by that. One factor that tends to remain level through the years is residents prior to homelessness, as Peter talked about. The vast majority of homeless people in Monterey County come from Monterey County. However, from 2015 to the present, there has been a significant migration within the county itself, as is evidenced by heavy increases in Salinas, Marina, Delray Oaks, countered by significant decreases in Seaside, Sand City, and Pajaro. And lastly, I'd like to draw your attention to the numbers Peter talked about associated with homeless veterans, where you will see a 22% decrease since 2015. This decrease in numbers can be directly attributed to focused and intense national funding support initiatives. Nationwide surge funding has made possible improvements within this homeless subpopulation, not just in our county, but across the country. It comes as no surprise that homelessness is a multifaceted, complex, and difficult challenge to overcome. We must continue to work together to establish a regional response that cuts through individual jurisdictions. We must foster the community will needed to move the ball forward, and most importantly, we must find ways to increase the stock of truly affordable rental housing for our most vulnerable citizens and apply services that they need the most. Lastly, I would like to thank you for your leadership and dedication to such an important community challenge, and the three of us remain available for any questions you may have.
So I know we do have some questions from the board, I'm sure, and we'll start at this end. Supervisor Phillips?
Just looking at it overall, I see in 2013 we had almost 2,600, and then we dipped in 2015 to 2,300, and now we're up to 2,837. Any way to account for that variance so much?
So, why it just goes up? You know, a lot of the factors that contribute to the change are macroeconomic factors: housing affordability, employment, and so on, healthcare. We have not really been able to, get a real predictive formula that tells you, what conditions need to be in place to increase or decrease that number. We know that the available housing stock makes a big difference. Housing affordability, health issues continue to be, in major demand within the population, especially substance use and mental health services. there's consistently a lack of resources available to folks to address that. And those disabling conditions affect their ability to find employment and maintain stable housing. So I don't know if I gave you a great answer, but
It's a good start to it. I do notice the migration that you pointed out to Salinas. It seems to get more migrated here, and I see Marina is getting more or less in Monterey, more in Delray Oaks. Any factors that lead to that?
well, I don't know exactly. More often than not, things like this, these numbers can change significantly when there's a big encampment that has developed in one area. We heard, for example, that Delroy Oaks had a big encampment, and there's movement, as a consequence of code enforcement, where a lot of, not just the specific folks that have been relocated, but a whole group that, goes around with them leaves an area as well, and it can change the demographics. There could be a closed shelter, a park which was formerly open to homeless, which, is now legally out of bounds for folks to hang out or rest. So there tends to be local code enforcement issues which tend to change the locations like this.
One of the things also to pay attention to, just in regard to that question, and I think it's the importance of the Lead Me Home Leadership Council and its reconstitution, is where there are services, you will oftentimes see folks, who need access, say, to a food pantry or hot meals, accessing those services in that community. So, example in Delray Oaks is the growth of the gathering place. So that's one example. But when you look at communities like Marina, Salinas, and Delray Oaks, there are services that are available to folks.
Yes.
You mentioned some other communities. Are we out of whack with other counties and other communities, or is our homeless situation consistent with those other?
Yeah, from my perspective, Monterey is consistent with the other communities, but it's way out of whack with what's necessary to reduce homelessness significantly in our country and in our state. The percentage of unsheltered in the community is very high. In places in the Midwest and the East Coast, those sheltered-unsheltered ratios are reversed. That has something to do with, in other words, there's 23% unsheltered and 77% would be sheltered. So the high percentage of unsheltered that's here, unfortunately, is consistent with Santa Cruz, it's consistent with Santa Clara, it's consistent with San Luis Obispo, but it's still far short of being close to optimal.
Well, one of the things that can just help with that, if you look at, say, Milwaukee, and I was at a presentation last week with the American Public Human Services in Milwaukee, was presenting what they've been doing to bring the homeless count to a functional zero, which is the development of both congregate and scattered site housing first homes for people. So in Milwaukee, though, they have a much larger stock of property that's vacant and usable and developable for those kinds of opportunities to bring people off the street. It was a very compelling presentation. It very much was tied into the savings in healthcare and savings in kind of local issues around citations. And they had a reinvestment strategy. So I think as we look to try and turn the needle, part of it is to try and identify the places where we can develop based on people's needs, both either scattered sites, so if we can, master lease facilities, so that people with challenges or people without challenges, we can place them rapidly in the housing first month.
And I get the feeling too that besides just the housing, we can provide the services for the mental health issues, the alcohol issues, the other obstacles to employment and other things.
Yeah, absolutely right, Supervisor Phillips. The supportive services component is critical to successfully ending homelessness for these folks. And the housing first models that Elliot mentions are, all of the good ones, very commonly have a component of support services that will enable the clients in those programs to maintain their current housing and turn around their situation. But what Housing First is based on is the concept that all rehabilitation and care and recovery comes from a stable housing perspective, number one. And then once that stability is in place, then all of the other supportive services can be that much more effective.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Salinas?
Thank you. Karen, maybe you can help me in terms of, we are getting better at getting a clear understanding of the census and the count. Does that lead for additional funding from the feds, or too bad? I mean, we're reducing what we're getting to local government.
It doesn't. I mean, it's information that we have to report on every year from multiple places. It is what Washington looks at when they look at funding allocations. What is happening from a funding perspective, from a national funding perspective regarding homelessness, however, is things are getting much, much harder. The rules are tightening. They've always been difficult, but the rules are tightening up to such a degree that it is becoming more and more complicated for organizations to be able to implement housing programs. I mean, they're doing it, but it is increasingly difficult. I think that one of the things that we are as a community starting to get better at is to look at funding streams from a variety of specters where it may not be homelessness related, but whole person care plugs into this, this plugs into this, and then using those as catalysts to be able to increase funding. Because again, using that veteran homeless information, which is replicated across the country, it was because there was serious support on a surge level, funding level, that made all of that happen. Extremely focused, extremely targeted, and a lot of it.
And I see that.
If I can just add, the general feeling in Washington, D.C. is that there's enough money that's been allocated for homeless services to end homelessness nationally. And that right now, their position is that continuums throughout the country need to be more efficient in the use of that money and prioritize more effectively. That's the attitude right now that is being promoted at the national level. And as Catherine says, working to target the most appropriate solutions to meet the specific population characteristics of your county and customize those solutions, that's where the emphasis is.
And then a question in terms of the results, 32% vans, cars are not leased. That's the largest group now in terms of encampments on wheels, I guess.
Yeah.
They move around and people move around.
Yeah.
Is there a focus, because I know there's been some direction of getting the electeds involved with making home at first, so that they can get into capital projects to do the construction of projects.
Absolutely.
Are they looking at this also in terms of, are there short-term solutions? And I know Supervisor Parker has to deal with Lapis or the street out there, but to look at maybe put KOA type of facilities where folks that are coming in, they can set up their shower, there's ability to, again, I don't know, is that being explored or not?
It is on the table to be explored. It kind of falls into the emergency shelter discussion. And it is interesting because through the last, 2 years, you know, the phenomenon known as Lapis Road has continued to, you know, increase and increase. And we've done surveillance, if you want to call it that, like 4 different times there. Lapis Road in and of itself accounts for a lot of that vehicle, people living in RVs, people, things, but also, you know, people are living in parking lots now. If you go to, you know, the parking lot of Wendy's or Carl's Jr., you know, the back of Kmart, you know, you'll find people who are spending a night or two here and then moving along every 72-hour thing, just shuffling around. It is becoming a bigger and bigger phenomenon here.
Thank you so much for your presentation. You know, it's always daunting to see this without any question. And having had the opportunity to participate in the homeless count a number of years ago, a number of times years ago, I'm really pleased to see that you were really focusing so much more particularly on reaching the younger people, the transitional youth, and I was shocked at the numbers of people younger than transitional youth, the kids that are on the streets. So I just want to ask you about this one element, though, as you were talking about the success of the veterans' homelessness, which has really been, just as you said, laser focused and a lot of money put into it. When you look at that, sort of, and yet coupled with the problem that we have of not finding low, inexpensive places for people to live, is there anything that we can learn from what was done with the veterans program that was successful that we could replicate for all of the other elements? You know, I'm just thinking, I know that there were a number of places that I had seen out of Fort Ord that had been redone, but how many times do I hear people saying, well, you know, just take all of the homeless and put them in Fort Ord? You know, it doesn't work like that. You know, it just doesn't because of the buildings and the limitations there. But did you identify anything that could be a clue for us?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest surge in homeless veteran money was through the SSVF program, the Support Services for Veterans and Families program. There's a lot of flexibility in that program. So, for example, if a homeless veteran or a homeless veteran with a family is identified, you know, you can immediately put them into a motel if necessary, right? If they need help with a security deposit, you have the authority within, if you're a provider, to double that if necessary. If someone needs a bed or kitchen items, you have the authority within that contract to prep that. If someone is qualified for HUD VASH, which is a specialized Section 8 voucher just for homeless veterans, they have a team they're like a real estate team. That's all they do is go out and talk to landlords over and over and over and over until they get that one homeless veteran in. Now, granted, the reception for a homeless veteran is going to be much more agreeable to someone else who has a different set of challenges, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of it is the flexibility to focus resources on the actual need of that particular client to get them off the street. That's what it's about, get them off the street. And I think that could be replicated, but flexibility within government contracts, aside from SSVF, is becoming like a unicorn. You know, we're losing flexibility, it's becoming much more rigid. So we're having to look at the places where we do have flexibility and exploit them as much as possible.
Good. And then one question specific to the census itself. Do you have any idea what the percentage was of available beds that were filled in the morning of the point in time count? You know, if 21% of the people counted were sheltered. I'm just wondering, were there other beds available for the 79% that were not, or were the beds all filled?
That would be
that was a housing inventory count, and I believe almost all of the beds were filled across the board. You know, the warming shelter was in full operation at that time. All the other shelters in the county as well.
I think, I don't have the HIC chart utilization that Catherine's trying to recall, but I seem to remember it was north of 95% usage.
Okay, great. Well, just before I turn it over to my other colleagues for questions, I just want to thank all three of you. I mean, you've been doing this just diligently for a very long time, and it's, you know, thankless work. And I appreciate it just very much, I really do. Thank you for that.
Chair, I also want to mention that I didn't, when I was up here, and also thank United Way for their leadership in terms of coordinating the contracts and help shepherding us along with the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers.
Thank you, and I'd like to call out Katie Castagna, the President and CEO of United Way, who's here with us today. Thank you. Good, thanks so much. And now Supervisor Lego.
Thank you for the report. Certainly, it's coming at a really good time where we have a lot of discussions going on and a lot of more interest from stakeholders to not only utilize the information in this report and let us gauge the areas where we got to do more, but hopefully this information will be put to use to make it into policy and actually carrying out projects. I think it's important for our board and hopefully some city councils from Monterey County who want to be more proactive in addressing this growing crisis. But it did seem like, as I think we mentioned, the numbers are very conservative, and I know Applied Survey Research has done great work here for many years. But in some of the communities, it seemed to be a really low undercount. You know, King City and Gonzales having no numbers marked for homeless residents in those counties. And then I look at Pajaro, where in 2015 it was 144 unsheltered, and it dropped to 14, and 77 sheltered to 0. It seems that that's like an undercount that happened there. It's too much of a drop to not notice that maybe that was a deficiency in doing the count in those communities. And some of those have unique circumstances, right? Pajaro is right on the border of Santa Cruz County, and those homeless residents could easily go stay in the shelter, 2 blocks away across the police station. But nonetheless, overall, I think is very important, and I hope that this translates into doing and moves our county to do what other counties have done, which is trying to invest in places, in buildings that we can move people out of homelessness and into transitional and permanent housing. When we visited San Francisco, even though they have a lot more resources than we do, years ago they started investing in buildings that could subsidize, and that's under the control of the county or nonprofit partners to be able to move people out. And as those places, at transitional places, as those places opened up, then you had opportunity to bring more people off the street. And we just haven't invested in that kind of stock that the county could use in a rapid rehousing or transitional program. But there is some things on the horizon that I think we should really look at. Using this information, the Mid-Peninsula Housing in Chinatown, that's certainly a partnership with DCSS to have caseworkers there, so it's successful, it's managed well. That's going to be a future outcome that we could weigh in utilizing this information. And certainly the ongoing efforts for a year-round shelter in Salinas is another, but there's a lot more. And certainly when we're deciding land use issues and we talk about inclusionary housing, whether it was the city of Salinas or it's the county's inclusionary housing, that's an important part of addressing it. A few projects for farm worker housing are going to be coming to us in the next year or two for consideration. I think that's important because there's a lot of competition for the low and very low housing stock, and with there's different circumstances now we got an influx of H-2A workers. That's creating unique issues in places like King City at the local hotels. There's some pushback on that, but it's a new challenge with the new challenges in labor and agriculture that we're having to confront too. So I just hope that for all my colleagues and for the community, that as we're listening to this report and seeing the major challenges, that we actually utilize that to carry out some projects and use this as motivation and inspiration to do what many people think is impossible, but we should be doing because other counties are on the cutting edge and doing some of those things. The last thing I wanted to mention was also, I think it was a big setback when we did away with redevelopment, because that was that 20% set aside for affordable housing, and that was money for the county, that was money for the cities, to put that money aside just to provide that affordable housing stock. And we're now 6-7 years without redevelopment, and that's each year, just the housing portion was $1 billion. So we're talking about $6-7 billion worth of just the state money going down to the local governments that we lost out, and I think that has exacerbated the housing crisis that we're facing today. So now that's one of the big issues they're trying to deal with in Sacramento, but it's certainly something I waited on because I thought it was a big mistake then. But now we're able to see how it's contributing to a growing crisis, not only in Monterey County, but throughout the state.
I just want to chime in really quickly, because as you were talking, I think it is worth noting Supervisor Salinas' years of leadership on the Lead Home Leadership Council, and you're taking over that role. And I think what you're raising is the conversation we need to have with the Lead Home Leadership Council to create those kinds of regional solutions. And I'm looking forward to bringing some recommendations, having a discussion sometime in the middle of July about permanent shelters in Monterey.
Thank you, Supervisor Leahy. Supervisor Parker, any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, just a couple questions. So I had been unclear as to whether RVs were considered housing or whether people were considered homeless. So it sounds like people who are living in their RVs are considered to be homeless.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then I had a question about how whole person care is, I mean, I know it's just getting underway, but how does that dovetail with some of these efforts to get people sheltered and the care that they need?
Let me take a crack. Catherine may have to step in, but so whole person care doesn't fund housing, so it doesn't fund physical structure, but it funds supportive services. So currently, through the two most relevant items that I'm aware of is one is expansion of the day programs that we have right now available at Dorothy's Place. So there can be deeper outreach to connect people into services that lead to housing. It can fund support at housing. So if there's supportive services needed at housing. And the other thing that I believe was on the agenda today was our contract with the Coalition of Homeless Services Providers to expand the use of the coordinated assessment and referral system.
And if I could just draw that nexus just a little bit more, is the correlation between the target population of whole person care, which is high frequency users of Medi-Cal, emergency rooms, law enforcement, all of that kind of stuff. It links directly with people who are the most vulnerable in our community. I mean, the good news that isn't reflected in your report is that people are getting housed. And by using coordinated entry, which has been on, launched less than a year now, the most vulnerable people in our community are being streamlined into housing first. That is good news, right? And the whole person care linkage deepens and refines that even better, which is super important.
Great, thank you. And then I guess I know that Housing First has been the mantra of the housing and urban development folks for the last several years. So what do we have in Monterey County in terms of a plan or options or whatever in terms of taking steps towards having housing to plug people into?
Housing First it all depends who you talk to. Housing First is touted as a wonderful model. You take people directly off the street, you put them in housing, and you wrap services around them. I was just talking to a provider this morning while you were on break about using the Housing First model, and the person went back to using that and just almost burned their unit down. Housing First is not as easy to implement in a community such as ours as the methodology would show. For example, in an urban area, they have the ability to take a lot of residential hotels, a lot of motels, retool them into permanent housing, and you're putting people into permanent individual units. We don't have that option here. We have to develop options like that. And when you're talking about a lot of programming here that are shared units, it is extremely complicated service delivery system. And so Housing First, the homeless providers have been grappling with it for the last at least 3 years. They continue to grapple with it. Other communities are also starting to voice real outcomes-based concerns about Housing First. The reality is many people do need a path towards housing. We need to be ready for housing. But it all depends on who you talk to. If you look at communities where rapid rehousing and Housing First models are very, very successful, There are communities where there is a lot of rental housing and it's affordable. That's not our situation.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that. The availability of housing stock and the ability of having the example of where we can master lease a whole hotel, wrap services around that hotel. That's the opportunity that we're very challenged with because we're in competition with farm laborers to be specific, and which is, you know, a key part of our economy.
So, sorry, another question. One of the other things, in addition to put all the homeless people in Fort Ord, is let's get the tiny houses. You know, those very inexpensive little houses that you can either wheel around or, you know, could be plumped someplace. And it's just wondering, you know, it sounds almost, talk about the unicorn, just mythical. And I'm wondering if you've seen any examples of communities where that has worked and if there is any similarity between our community and the places where those tiny houses have been successful.
I've seen communities where tiny homes have been a response. In most of those communities, they've been the only response though. So when you see a community that says, we just built a community with 40 tiny homes, that's usually the total response for the entire county for their homeless problem is 40 units, right? And there's a big difference between a tiny home that is a wood wagon that you can drag around with you and wheel around with you from place to place, and a tiny home that is plumbed, that has, is on a sewage system, that has a kitchen, that has a bathroom, that has the basic things for habitation. So it's an option, but when you try to, if you look at building a big tiny homes community, the money connected to actually building that and all the things that are necessary to complement it, it's really, you might as well just build houses.
Exactly. Okay, that's the answer. Thank you. Great. Any other questions or comments from the board at this point? Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item? Yes. Oh, she's not a member of the public. She's not us.
Elsie Jimenez, Director of Health. I wanted to respond a little bit more or expand to their response regarding the whole person care. As part of our whole person care agreement, there is going to be a contract coming forward to your board for consideration in the coming fiscal year with Mid-Peninsula or Mid-Penn Housing. The part of their proposal for funding for the new China House development is that they would allocate anywhere between 20 and 40 of those units for a whole person care population. And so we'll be coming before your board for your consideration and adoption. Obviously, that project is probably 2 years out, but it is something that we're working towards making sure that we provide the housing and then more importantly, use whole person care to provide that wraparound services. Additionally, Chispa is going to be building a low-income housing unit, I believe in Marina, for seniors. And again, we have a letter of understanding with them that they would allocate, once those units are allocate a certain percentage of that as well for a whole person care like population. So those are two projects that are probably a couple of years out, but again, we'll provide that necessary infrastructure that we need. But as Elliot and Catherine said, I mean, there isn't sufficient housing stock to be able to meet the demands, not only of unaccompanied adults, but more importantly, the families that we see an increase in the last year regarding increase in families that are homeless.
Thank you, Elsie. Any other comments, questions? No? Well then, thank you so much for
Hi, Wes White, Salinas resident, also president of the Salinas Students Union. We opened a shelter in the beginning of the month. Got shut down after a week, but we tried very hard to catch people before they fell. You mentioned code enforcement, and that is probably one of the biggest things I've been worried about for a while, because like the Salinas homeless ordinance, unlawful camping, throughout the entire county we have similar things, and here you are trying to take care of people, and the other jurisdictions almost seem like they're creating more of a state-created danger by giving people tickets, by taking RVs. RVs are actually more safe than tents, but yet it seems like we're trying to use vehicle code to get around while you're camping. We just need to start working about treating people like people. That is probably the biggest thing that our jurisdictions can't even agree on. Local, county, state, federal. But we've really just got to mature as a nation and just start treating people as people, start monetizing less. If we brought costs down, then we wouldn't need to raise minimum wage. Just as soon as we raise minimum wage, we start jacking up all the costs. 5, 10 cents just even the first day. And it's really hard to survive in this kind of economy where it's just squeezing out the humanity for dollars. And we need to start treating people better. Like I said, it's state-created danger. I mean, hey, we don't like you, you're not giving us money. We can find better people that have deeper pockets, and that's what we're going to make space for. And life is not a casino. And we can't just say, oh, you ran out of money, guess what? You should just fall off the face of the earth. And that's what I've actually gotten as a response from some electeds and their friends. And it's very disheartening to see people in leadership roles. You know, we have role models of industry, electeds, administration, staff, combined. We're choosing to remain immature and take advantage of people, which is why I'm glad that this board seems very proactive, and I appreciate that very much. And I hope it will not just trickle, but just almost a jet blast of trickling down this attitude toward our local jurisdictions as well.
Thank you for your comments. Any comments from the board? Well, with that, then I'll thank you very much for your presentation.
Yes, I could have a comment?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just
The
want to
items
say,
that would not die.
I really appreciate, well, you asked for questions before, and I said my comments. So I just wanted to express my appreciation also for all the work that goes in, not only to this count, but everything else, trying to grapple with this issue. And I'm very much someone who likes to focus upstream, but I think we haven't prevented this one. So and it's just a huge issue that really affects the health and safety of obviously the people that we've counted. Hundreds, if not thousands more, who are in insecure housing or that we just didn't find, and of course quality of life for all of us. So I think this year I think we really have to deal with the housing issue. We've been dancing around it. I don't know, hoping that someone else would do it or that it would somehow resolve itself. But I think we see that the situation is really exacerbated by the lack of housing, and you see people being displaced by the enforcement issues. Lapis Road is directly a result of the fact that most of the cities in Monterey County have said you can't park your RVs on the streets of the city, so they found a place. And just telling them they can't park there either doesn't solve the problem. And so I think that's really going to impact us as a county as we start to look at the responsibilities for shelters in Salinas on the peninsula, potentially year-round, safe parking options, transitional housing. These are not in our budget yet, but I think they will be things that we prioritize as very critical community needs. And so I think it really is going to take a lot of work on the part of the county, a really big commitment. Recently we did an RFI for a safe parking program. We didn't get any responses, so it may be time that the county actually has to develop the program ourselves and administer it, because the need is great, and it's we can't always rely on our community partners. They're stretched thin too. The other thing that I hope we can see this year is, I know the Leave Me Home folks have been grappling and struggling with this issue, but I really would like to see the Leave Me Home folks come to the community, come to us with the things that you've thought about. What are the options? What are the opportunities? We need a whole continuum of kinds of housing and choices, so that we know where the obstacles are. Supervisor Adams and I are going to be engaging the Monterey Peninsula cities to say, okay, what are you doing? And of course, that's going to have related impact on services, whether it's whole person care or other coordination by the county. But I think, I think there are some interim steps that various jurisdictions are able and willing to take and are taking, but to really move people who want to be in housing, it's going to take work on all our part to get creative and not just say, gosh, it's hard here. Of course it's hard here. So let's figure out how we can do what we need to do. It's been decades that we have not been building sufficient affordable rentals. It's not just in the last few years. And we need to figure out how to do a much better job. And unfortunately now we have a crisis, so we have to move more quickly than we would like. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anything else? Great, we're over time. Thank you very much for your presentation.